For the back of your notes, we're going to start talking about spread. Spread has to do with variation, so what variety there is in our data. Some things when you're looking for something that has less variation, there's a smaller IQR, which is the middle 50% of your data. It's the box part of your box and whisker. Another way to think about it, you can also look at range as well, so there's a smaller range. So the data clusters around a set of values, whereas a greater variation may have a larger IQR, so the box is wider, and the data is widely or evenly distributed. Once again, you can also look at range. IQR may be a new term for you. In IQR, what that means is the interquartile range. The way you calculate that is by taking Q3, so our upper quartile, and subtracting Q1, our lower quartile. So for example, let's look at this other box plot for a moment. You'll notice we have our 5-number summary, our min, first quartile, median, third quartile, highest. So if we want to know the interquartile range, we'll take the third and we'll subtract the second. So 6 minus 4, I mean your IQR is 2, and that's the middle 50% of your data. Remember, in your box and whisker plot, you can think of it as quarters. Each part of your box and whisker plot is 25% of your data. Okay, so let's go back to our notes and look at this. So here, our IQR, our Q3 would be 12.5, and we'd subtract 5. So this IQR is only 7.5. Whereas this one goes from 17.5 to 2.5, so our IQR would be 12. So this one is a lot wider than this. However, if you were to look at the range of this ticket 1 is actually greater than the ticket 2. But we will be specific, either both be the same, or we'll ask about one type of the variation of the spread, about the IQR or the range. So let's go ahead and let's look at our first example. It says, schools in Florida were surveyed about the current price of a school lunch. The responses to the surveys are in the dot plots below. Use the dot plots to answer the following questions. Which state appears to have a higher mean cost for school lunch? So we're looking for which one has a higher average. If you wanted, you could sit there and figure out each of the data values of the points and add them all together and divide by how many you have. But just looking at the values, you can actually estimate this. Notice how the Florida has a lot higher values, so starting at like 2.25 or mostly above that. Whereas South Carolina, most of the dots are 2.25 or lower. Since most of the dots of the Florida are on the higher numbers, it will have a higher mean. You do not actually have to do the calculations to figure that out. Now let's look at the variation. If we're talking about variation, we want to look at spread. We don't have an IQR, or the interquartile range of a dot plot, so we're going to want to be looking at range here. Looking at Florida, we range from 1.25 to 3. Okay, but looking at South Carolina, we go from 1 to 3. So while they're similar, which one has a slightly higher variation? Well, South Carolina does, because it has a smaller number that it starts at, and therefore the range will be greater than Florida. Okay, let's look at the next question about box and whisker plots. So first of all, let's compare the range of the data. If we want the range, we want the max minus the min. So we look at worker A, we're going to do 250 minus our min of 100, means we have a range of 150. If we look at worker B, our max is 200, our min is 75, so as we subtract the two, we have a range of 125. So I could ask you about the variation. You could tell me which one's greater, and we'll actually get to that in part C. Before we do that, let's look at B. Compare the center of the data sets. So remember, with center, we could either be talking about the mean or the median, or possibly both. But let's think about it. We have a box and whisker plot. Do we know the mean of a box and whisker plot? Well, no, we don't. Do we know the median of a box and whisker plot? Yes. So we're going to go ahead and look at the median, because we don't know the mean. So if we look at the median for worker A, that's going to be the middle line of our box. It's at 175. If we look at the median, the middle part of our box for worker B, we're at 125. So when it asks you to compare, you simply have to state which one's greater. So we could say the median of A is greater than B. The other option would be to say that B is smaller than A. But you're going to either use something like that, one of your inequalities. Smaller than, less than, or greater than, larger than, or equal to. Finally, when we talk about variation, we're talking about that range or the interquartile range. Since we already found the range in A, let's go ahead and compare. Well, the range of worker A, once again, is greater than B, because 150 is larger than 125. Now I've got a challenge for you. Let's go ahead and look at the box. On the box, you'll notice, okay, the IQR, so our interquartile range goes from 200 to 125, so it's 75 for worker A. If you go to the interquartile range for worker B, it's also 75. Our boxes are the same size. So if we look at the IQR, they are actually the same. So that's two ways that you can interpret the variation of these box and whisker plots. Go ahead, don't forget to take your Canvas quiz and start working on your homework. Bye.